We're living through a unique time, both with the global pandemic and the social unrest. What have you all learned about yourselves during this period?
I prefer it, and I want it to go on forever. Not the social unrest, the lockdown. I'm enjoying the lockdown, I mean. It suits me.
I found that I had a lot of things I didn't realize that were very important to me that were like I would do for sanity over the many decades of my life, and when they're taken away, it's challenging to figure out like new stuff that makes you feel like a person.
I mean, technologically speaking, I've realized that if the apocalypse were coming and technology was all that I had, I would be not good. So I'm shocked I'm here today. I'm shocked that my computer worked, and that's that.
Ramy, what about you? Have you learned anything about yourself in this period?
I agree with. I mean, definitely.
Just say no.
What Dan said was great. I really haven't learned. It's like you think you learned something and then you don't, and then you're like, no, that wasn't. That was just. I was just losing my mind. I was just losing my damn mind.
Kenan, I'm curious. In this moment in time, are you sort of thinking, thank God we don't have to do an episode of SNL right now, or are you thinking conversely, too bad we're dark because we could really lift people up in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the responsibility of doing comedy is to make people try to feel good through bad times, but it is definitely very tiptoe-ish at the moment, so it might be a little harder than, it would be funny. So I don't even know if the point of doing it would be worth it, if it's not gonna be funny, because everybody's so sensitive about everything right now.
That's the best time. When everyone's
right?
on edge and everyone's sensitive, that's the best time to be insensitive. My show was packed with jokes about AIDS, cancer, famine, the Holocaust. This is just gonna top it up.
I'm glad this helps Ricky's brand.
Exactly, it's helping. This is Ricky's prime time right now.
Do you ever get nervous, Ricky?
I don't know. I have some anxiety dreams.
What are your anxiety dreams?
Well, I'm on a train and I'm going in and out of a tunnel, and my dad spills milk all over my face.
You sure that's milk?
That's not true. That's not true. I just made that up.
You just lied to us about a dream you had?
I'm anxious right now, if I'm being honest.
Are you? What are you anxious about, Dan?
Ramy, one of the things you've talked about with your show is that you hoped it would sort of start conversations. What kinds of conversations has it started for you and your family?
I think so much of what we've looked at in the show is kind of a conversation of a millennial who has faith, which just feels like a thing that's super contradictory. I think in general, religion's basically just like a punchline in comedy. And I think for us to kind of find what's funny within it, while it's still being a genuine thing, as it is to a lot of people who are trying to figure out the nooks and crannies of like, well, how do I hold on to what I believe in and also react to what I'm feeling and seeing in the present moment. And so I think on a community level, it's really interesting just for the various Muslim communities to not only look at this story and feel relatability, but also be challenged on certain things. I mean, one of the things we looked at in season 2, we were really lucky we got Mahershala Ali to play my sheikh, and it was an exciting thing for the show because you have this Arab Muslim family, and then suddenly as a show, we get to look at anti-blackness within the Arab community. We get to look at what I think is a type of racism that we don't really talk about, which is there's this umbrella of people of color, but underneath it, there's still a lot of anti-blackness. And so to be able to break that down on a show like ours, while also looking at things that people care about, and then seeing LGBT characters, and they're also still people who are still called Muslim, and that's something that people have a hard time reckoning with as well. And so to be able to do that as a show, I make my show for people who resonate with it to watch. Sometimes people think like, oh man, you put a Muslim family on TV and now the South are gonna understand Muslims, and I'm like, the South isn't watching Hulu. Like, I don't think they care. This isn't about that. This isn't about swing voters. It's not about bringing people over. This is about people who are invested in these themes also need to be challenged on what they think they know. And so that's what's interesting to me. It's not about bringing in other people. It's really about we're all in the same room, but we can't just be echoing the same conversations. We need to dig into them in a more meaningful way.
What are the sort of responses that come at you with the shows that you guys are making that you perhaps don't expect at all?
Mine was the emotional response. I was surprised people would come up to me and they'd tell me their story of grief. Nearly everyone that came up to me said, I lost my sister 3 weeks before I watched the show, or I lost my wife last year. And it was amazing that they would say that to a stranger, because they sort of used the show as an in, and they said, and I was Tony, that was me for a year. So that was quite a shock. It made me want to treat that responsibly in series 2, so I didn't make him get better, because you don't snap out of depression. It does sort of affect you, and the things that affect you is when a real person comes up to you and tells you it affected their actual life. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of scary to have a responsibility as a comedian, because it's not good. It's not good to have a responsibility as a comedian. As a person, you do worry, but you can't detach yourself from the world as much as I'd like to. So you just try and make bad things funny. That's all.
I think any time you tell stories that are not part of the mainstream narrative, you're going to affect people. In my case, to really make an active choice to tell a gay love story that felt authentic to my own experience in a way that I hadn't seen depicted in television before. I think as anybody whose stories are kind of not at the forefront, you end up as an actor or as a viewer, you end up watching yourself in a way kind of distilled into a version of what people want you to be, or what network executives consider to be kind of a palatable version of who you are. And so for me, I think, I was given an opportunity, and I was given the freedom by both our networks in Canada and the US to tell whatever stories I wanted to tell. And as a result, it was a conscious effort on my part to make sure that all the intricacies of the relationship that I was writing felt real, and that when I walked into the store that I owned with my boyfriend, that we kissed as straight couples would kiss. And you realize in those moments that isn't represented a lot on TV. You don't see casual intimacy between two men on television. And at first, it obviously kind of strikes you as like, I wonder how people are going to take this. I wonder how kind of middle America is going to perceive this. But the surprising thing was that I can probably count, and maybe I'm not scouring the internet for negativity, but I do feel like, the positive outcome of this is that I could probably count on two hands the negative things that have been written. But the volume of letters and notes from people, be it kids who have seen themselves reflected in our story, or kids who have come out of the closet by using certain dialogue from our show, or parents who have accepted their children in ways because they had been able to learn through the show. I think television is an incredibly powerful medium, and I think in comedy in particular, people don't expect to necessarily be caught off guard by sentimentality or love. And I think this new wave of television, and I think the freedom that a lot of new creators in TV have been allowed is the capacity to be funny, and to also be emotional, and to also tell stories that we don't get to see. So it's very exciting, and I have to say that it's quite thrilling to be in the company of everyone here, because I do feel like the work that everyone has done has helped move the dial for voices and for stories that we don't get to see all the time.
Damn, that was very well said, Dan. My goodness.
Must be a writer.
I think it's true. I think people second guess the public too often. I think, as you say, networks, they do say, can the public take this when it's a taboo subject or something? And the answer is yes. Real life's much scarier than anything in fiction. I deal purposely in taboo subjects for that reason, that I do want people to feel slightly uncomfortable when I start talking about it. There's no harm can come from discussing taboo subjects. That's what stops them being taboo, and it takes the audience to a place it hasn't been before, and that's exciting in fiction. And we create our own heroes and villains as sort of role play for the soul.
Yeah, I will say though, with taboo subjects, it's obviously some of you guys talk about that stuff more than I do, but I think it's also important what the point of view or perspective on the taboo subject is. I think sometimes people just do shock to do shock, and I do think that stuff can cause actual harm in the world. I really do. I think there are jokes against certain marginalized groups that can actually hurt. So I think talking about taboo subjects is extremely, extremely beneficial, but I do think that the point of view you take on them is also important.
Of course. That's what I always say. Is there anything you wouldn't joke about? I say, no, it depends on the joke. An offence often comes when people mistake the subject of a joke with the actual target. And that's really important. And that's a really important distinction to make. But a big part of my comedy is saying things I do not mean. I say the wrong thing because I know the audience knows the right thing. And that's why they laugh.
How do you feel about audiences that might watch it and think, oh, that is how Ricky feels. That is his true point of view.
To a certain extent, you've got to aim at people who get it. If I play to 15,000 people, there are going to be rapists, paedophiles, murderers. I'm not going to,
Who's coming to see your show, Ricky? What is your demo?
But do you know what I mean? To think that someone might not get that joke, I think that's a worrying state of mind, because there comes to a point where you go, listen, the joke's there, the joke's gettable, most people get it. If there's one person that doesn't get it, I can live with that. And I think that's the exciting bit, that they feel clever when they get it. That someone might take you at face value doing an ironic joke or satirical joke. Well, yeah, some people try to inject themselves with bleach. I don't know what to say, really. There are stupid people in the world.
As the longest tenured cast member on SNL, when did you get comfortable with the idea that you would decide when you're ready to move on versus Lorne Michaels deciding for you? So put another way, when in your tenure did you stop being nervous about getting fired?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't worried about being fired after a couple of seasons, just because you have to let that go and just kind of do the job, you know what I mean? And if you're so focused on getting fired every single show, you can't focus on entertaining people.
You've got to try and get fired. That's my advice. Try and get fired.
Right.
Ricky, that is terrible advice.
Go the other way. Yeah, exactly.
That's not good advice, Ricky. Try and get fired. You can do that if you're Ricky Gervais, but somebody else gets their first job, they take your advice, they try and get fired. Guess what? They get fired.
They got fucking fired.
Yeah, I know.
The next 5.
They get over it. They'll thank me later.
I just also have to say, Kenan, you are so good on SNL, and you are so, it's just, watching you is so, you're just so effortless, and there is so much stress that goes into that job. I've been to a couple tapings, and just as an audience member, I'm stressed out. You just make it look so easy, and the character work that you do is so joyful and fun to watch. It kind of speaks for itself in terms of why you have not been fired. It is a skill set that just is magnificent to watch.
Thank you, man. I don't take praise well, but I really appreciate that. I've been very blessed, is all I could say. Just try to stay focused and really try to figure out the formula of comedy. That's what I was telling Ricky earlier, that I loved his special so much, because he spent so much time talking about how to talk about, like, going back to taboo subjects, but just showing the fact that anything can be talked about if you do it smartly. You know what I mean? And that's how I approach, sketches, or trying to push forward how, black comedy, I guess, is perceived or progressing or whatever, and just trying to move away from just playing traditional roles and stuff like that. So always just being very serious about the approach, basically.
Dinesh, your character from Silicon Valley, what was the sort of thought process in taking that role all those years ago? And did you worry about the sort of typecasting that could come with it?
Not really for that specific show, because even though I'm a nerd, everybody's a nerd. That's a show about nerds, right? If I was the only brown guy on the show and I was the only nerd, that would be one thing, but that is a show about nerds. And I was just such a fan of Mike Judge. Everything he does is so good that for me, I knew that character was going to be specific enough that it wasn't going to fall into the stereotypical roles that I've been talking about. So no, for me, easiest job I've ever said yes to is Silicon Valley. Over
the course of the run of Silicon Valley, your career, I think it's fair to say, has exploded. But I want to talk about sort of this moment in time, the pressures that come with the choices that you make. One of those things was being a superhero, being a part of the Marvel superhero family, and there's a first in that. How significant was that for you, and what kind of sort of weight comes with it?
Well, it was very significant for me because it was something I really, really personally wanted to do. I'm a big fan of sci-fi, big fan of superheroes, big fan of Marvel movies, so I really, really wanted to do that. Now, on top of that, there's this other pressure that comes in that I'm the first South Asian superhero in a major Hollywood movie, in a Marvel movie. I'm the first Pakistani superhero, but then that stuff, it's a little harder to negotiate because I can only represent myself. I can't represent the millions and millions of people. So I do feel that pressure, but I think the only way to relieve that pressure is just to have more people have these opportunities. For me, when I got that part, I was like, I want to look like someone who could take on sort of the traditional Hollywood-looking superheroes. So I wanted to look like someone who could take on Thor, who could take on Captain America. To me, that was an important part. And for me, it was important because I was the first Pakistani superhero.
So you had to get jacked for your culture?
Yeah, I'm doing reps for Pakistan.
You have to get ripped for it. That's the newest Ice Bucket Challenge. Rip for Pakistan.
All of Pakistan can now eat cake and sit on a couch because I'm out here doing pull-ups.
We're going to touch very quickly on the photo that broke the internet. I guess the first place to start is what surprised you most about the sort of response to it?
Just that my aunts saying they were really proud of me. Did not expect that. That was a weird one. Having aunts send me a shirtless picture of myself is not something I'd expected. Listen, it got so much bigger than I thought it was going to get. I had no idea that it was going to be like that. If I'd known it was going to be like that, I probably wouldn't have done it because I'll tell you, I've come to hate that picture.
You have? Why?
I just, it's weird. You sort of get a weird body dysmorphia when the whole world is concentrating on how you look. And listen, I'm very, very grateful. And I put those pictures out for a reason, right? I did that because I wanted that reaction, obviously. But then when you get that reaction, it's a little weird where you're like, people are really judging little bits of your physical being. And I know a lot of people have it a lot worse than me, but it sort of makes you feel kind of naked. I became shallow. I got obsessed with how I look, and then all I would see are sort of what I perceive as flaws.
That happened to me. People judge me because of my body a lot, and I'm trying to turn that around by being more cerebral. I probably haven't been to the gym in 35 years just to try and...
You got in shape, didn't you, Ricky? Yeah, you did.
Yeah, you did.
Did I?
Did I?
I've had liposuction, but only on. So I've had a lot of liposuction, but only in my testicles, because it's where I put all my fat. So I just had enormous balls, and I've had them
That
leaked.
picture would break the internet for sure.
That's not where I anticipated that going.
I did.
You did. Oh, good. Shame on me.
Yeah, I was like, when is Ricky going to talk about his fat balls again?